PRovoke podcast is brought to you by PRovoke Media and produced by the international broadcast specialists Marketeers. Support for this podcast comes from Notified, the integrated, intelligent and easy-to-use PR software. Get a free demo today at notified.com.
Hi, I'm Aarti Shah, Executive Editor for PRovoke Media, and today we're going to have another conversation about the future of work. So the last, 18 months and counting has fundamentally changed us as human beings, and there are some far-reaching implications for all areas of our life, including, or perhaps especially, the way we work. And, as we are all looking at office reopenings in the US anyway, we've been hearing a lot of different perspectives, especially from leaders, not just from our business, but from the entire business community, right? We've heard some CEOs whose perspectives have been quite innovative and others that have been quite tone deaf, and everything sort of in between, as we all are sort of embracing what is this major inflection point in the way that we work. But no matter what the CEOs say, the data that's emerged around this topic have painted a pretty clear picture. And that's that employees want flexibility in where they work and when they work. In fact, I think some surveys have shown that flexibility is now a core benefit that ranks only second to compensation. To sort of drive this point home, I'll actually read a couple of the headlines that I've seen just in the last couple of weeks. One is from Recode. Companies that make people return to the office will lose employees. One is from the Wall Street Journal. Remote work is the new signing bonus. And another is from the New York Times. We need remote work for everyone. So you get the idea. So on today's call, we're going to talk to someone, or on today's episode rather, we're going to talk to someone who is part of the leadership team of an agency that has gone mostly remote in response to employee demands. Beth Haiken is EVP at Method Communications, and we're going to have a lightning Q&A on why it's critical for PR agencies, even those who before the pandemic were firmly rooted in in-person work, to embrace remote work. Welcome, Beth.
Thanks, Aarti. It's great to be here.
So tell me about Method's journey from being mostly in person to mostly remote.
Yeah, it's happened quickly. I think it surprised all of us by how incredibly successful it's been. Method started out in Salt Lake City, very office-based culture, moved to San Francisco, then opened an office in New York. And, we've always been a very reasonable agency in terms of work-life balance and prioritizing family life. So we always had some flexibility in terms of being able to work from home, one day a week or come in late or leave early for kids' plays or whatever, but really had not made that transition to fully remote work until the pandemic hit us like a freight train. And in the space of about 48 hours, we sent everyone home. And that really changed everything.
So I guess on that note, what was the most important sort of mindset shift that had to happen to embrace remote work and to adjust from being an in-person agency to being one that was mostly remote, or I guess all remote, if we're talking about the start of the pandemic?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. So one is just to trust that creativity can happen anywhere. And that the most important weapon that you have as a PR agency is the smartest people, the best talent. And you need to be flexible enough to get that talent to come to you. And that may include hiring people who don't live near one of your offices, right? It's super important. People's lives change, their husbands or wives get jobs in different places, or somebody needs to go back to graduate school, or there's an elderly parent who requires someone to move close by. All of these things are super, super important in terms of the way that people prioritize their lives. And it's insane to lose people over those. I think that's one one thing is just you really come to prioritize getting the best talent and keeping the best talent versus where that talent is located. I think another big shift, and people have different words for this, but you really just have to focus on the work. It's not about the hours. It's not about the location. It's not about the proximity. It's about, is the work getting done? And once you start to focus on the work, the need for a location-based solution just sort of goes up in smoke.
So that's a good sort of segue into my next question, and that's these three C's, right? Which are the reasons that some in our industry would come out against remote work, and that's culture, collaboration, and creativity. I'm curious to know how you all have managed those three areas of Method.
Yeah, so obviously this is a moving target. We're all kind of getting used to this and trying to figure out what we're doing and what happens next as the world evolves. But I think the most important thing, let me start that again. Culture, collaboration, and creativity. It's really critical to understand that those are all intentional things. They don't happen organically, automatically, just because you have people in the same place. And I know, pre-pandemic, pre-working from home, there were times when I, looked around the Method office or other offices that I've been a part of, and you look around, you see all these people on their headphones and they're all, working on their laptops in the same room. And that's not culture. That's not collaboration, right? That's just a whole bunch of people who happen to be working in the same location. And so once you start to separate that from location, I think it becomes much easier. I think you have to think about what each of those actually means to people. And honestly, certainly as far as culture goes, you've got to ask your employees. I have always been a huge proponent of employee surveys and interviews and asking people what they really want versus assuming that, everyone of a certain age or persuasion wants this benefit or, wants to work like this. And, we did a quick and dirty survey recently. It was super fascinating. The thing that people prioritize the most in terms of what they want or associate with office culture is that social benefit. The top thing that we asked people, what would you come into the office for? Having lunch with someone was the number one thing. Even more than a client meeting, even more than sort of water cooler buzz, although both of those ranked. And so if you think about that, you think, well, that doesn't necessarily have to be associated with people coming into an office. I could organize a lunch at my house and invite some people. We could pick a restaurant in Oakland that's easy for people to get to and meet up. If that's what's important to culture, is sort of creating these shared experiences, you can do that associated with an office or not associated with an office at all.
I think that's such an excellent point. And I think the key word used there was intentional, right? I think people are having to be more intentional about building cultures and places for people or ways for people to collaborate. I think Brent Hyder, who's the president and chief people officer at Salesforce, I think he said it best, he said the 9-to-5 workday is dead and the employee experience is about more than ping pong tables and snacks, right? I feel like there was a moment where people were shorthanding culture with bar carts and having snacks in the office. And now people are going to have to really be much more intentional about that. And when it comes to creativity, we've said this before, but we saw some of our best work in the Innovation Sabre Awards North America 2021, as well as the Sabre Awards North America 2021. And this is work that was, brainstormed and executed while everybody was fully remote. So if that's any indicator, it did not seem like the creativity of the industry suffered at all in 2020. Beth, just closing, what would you say to anyone in our industry, whether they're agency side or whether they're brand side, who's having a tough time coming around to a more flexible working environment? What advice would you give them?
It's a great question. And I guess it's challenging for me to answer because I think about that and I think, how could it be hard to come around to this idea? This is such a no-brainer for me. This is like, we all should have done this years ago. I think about the number of years that I spent, getting up early so that I could get a parking space, make it into the city by a certain amount of time. I mean, there were years when I was in the city before 8 a.m. for, days and days and days and wouldn't get home until after dark. And you think about that and you just think that's insane. But I guess, the best questions are always the simplest ones. Why? Right? This is what millennials and Gen Z are asking. When someone says to them, you need to have your butt in this seat every day from 8:30 to 5:30, their question is why? And they're not being rude. They're actually interested. If there really were a good reason, that would be one thing. But, the sort of arbitrariness and this idea like, oh, well, we've always done it this way, or, we've done it this way in the past and it worked. That certainly may be true, but it just doesn't mean that that's the only way or the best way or, so I think just taking a step back and asking yourself, why are you having a hard time letting go of this? What is it that what is it that you miss? What is it that you're afraid of losing? And again, to your point, Aarti, that word intentional, if what you fear you're going to miss is seeing your colleagues and having close relationships with your colleagues, I would just encourage you to think about the fact that those relationships aren't guaranteed to happen because people are in the same place, and can happen even if they're not in the same place. So then the question is, if that's what's important to you, how can you work to put in place channels and ways that you can create those close relationships? Because I think you can. I think everything that people liked or loved or valued about being together in an office can also be replicated and made even better when you're creating a work culture that respects people's lives, that allows them to take care of their parents and their kids and their pets and their gardens and their mental health and their physical health. Just how could that possibly not be better for everyone?
Wow, very, very well said, Beth. Well, I want to keep this short. So I know there's a lot more we can say, but we'll wrap it up here, and perhaps we'll have you back, Beth, to continue this conversation. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Aarti. It was really fun.
And we will be back soon with another episode of the PRovoke Media podcast.
You have been listening to the PRovoke podcast, brought to you by PRovoke Media and produced by the international broadcast specialists Marketeers. Support for this podcast comes from Notified, the integrated, intelligent and easy-to-use PR software. Get a free demo today at notified.com.